Hey cousins, welcome to Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Welcome, cousins, to this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. I'm your host, Cornell Wright, and today we're going to talk about a quick review of what happened in 2020. Now, as the people's lobbyist, my job is hopefully to do a couple things for you. One is try to help you understand when something is good, provide some education, and then also provide some recommendations of what we, the people, can start to do moving forward. Now also, as you notice in the title of the program, it's Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. So the brown liquor is pretty clear, right? But perhaps I've been a little confusing for some cousins in describing what's a good idea and what's a bad idea, using the same word bad for both, if you will, cousins. So some things are really bad, and I'm going to go through 7 of those that I think I touched on during the course of this year. Also, there are 7 things that are bad, but good, if you will. And hopefully I've been clear with you on what those are as well, cousins, and I'll go through a list of 7 of those as well. I like the number 7, so let's stick with that. So as we look at this whole question of 2020, and we're about to wrap this one up, first of all, cousins, I have to give a big shout out and appreciation to the production team at Baobab Tree Studios in New Haven, Connecticut. They've made this better, hopefully your enjoyment, and so I really appreciate them. And by the way, cousins, I thank all of you who have subscribed so far, and as those of you who haven't, come on, help me out. Because if you want me to come back next year, which I'm going to come back anyway, I need you to subscribe. So, cousins, let's talk about the bad ideas that I think were truly bad that we tried to cover this year. The whole discussion of misinformation and disinformation that was perpetrated on all the cousins in the country. We talked about how that is a technique that's used for those who want to manipulate internally to an organization, to a group of people, and how disinformation is used to manipulate from outside. So there's inside misinformation, that's cousins telling us things that aren't right, trying to go us down a path that's not good for us collectively, or perhaps even individually. And then there's disinformation, which is outside actors, from people coming outside trying to influence us and perhaps not having us be as united and as strong as we can and should be. We talked about the great American tragedy, as I described to you, and that continuing process and loop that we seem to be in, and that is of having black and brown cousins killed by law enforcement for non-justifiable purposes. Think about it, cousins. We go back and we think through those things. No one complains or says anything when there's a justified shooting by a police officer. It's when they are out of the bounds of what is reasonable and appropriate to our collective views, that's when it becomes a question of an issue. Right, cousins? So it's not like we're being incorrect or not supporting the police, or I would even suggest, and we can talk about this in future episodes in 2021, defunding is not the word I want to use. Okay? As I mentioned to you, I have my brother was a police officer. He passed away this year, 2020. I have nephews, who are members of the police departments now. I want them to be taken care of and supported across not only their departments, but their communities as well. So we can talk more about that. Lies, cousins. This year, and because we have so much communication capability, 24-hour news cycles, you can go online, you can find all sorts of information all the time. There are lies out there. Now, cousins, one of the things I'm trying to establish with you is that I don't want to lie to you about anything. And so from this point on to going forward, if I'm lying, I want you to tell me so. And as you notice on my descriptions now, the programs, I'm trying to give you the source of information I'm coming from. And as it turns out, cousins, sometimes something can change over time. That's fine. And if some information changes and all of a sudden it causes me to change an opinion of mine because there's new facts, I'll tell you what that is. as we all are to change our minds as new facts become presented that are new accuracies in regards to how we look for things. That's why they're archaeologists. That's why we have history. That's why we have researchers. That's why people still pursue PhDs in order to become terminal degrees, in order to help to advance knowledge on the part of all mankind. Lies are not good for us, cousins. They start to create things that are inaccuracies, incorrect, and starts to bring up emotions that are inappropriately used by us. That leads us into the whole discussion of hate. I talked about that this past October, cousins. Think about how much stronger we would be as the United States of America if hate wasn't a divisive, blowing up type of experience that we have. And I would challenge any of you cousins to help me understand why you are hateful of one of the other cousins here. Now, you may have a personal situation. We can understand that, okay? Something may have happened to you. So you may have had that emotion translate for you that way. But in regards to arbitrarily decide, hey, because a bicycle rider comes along, I hate bicycle riders. Come on, cousin. That's not right, and that's not good for any of us, okay? One of the other areas, number 5, for those of you keeping track, okay? Misinformation, circle of the American tragedy, lies and hate, okay? Move number 5, and that was we attended a conference around the North Pole for commerce discussions about transit of ships going over the North Pole without the benefit of icebreakers, and we still claim there's no climate change. Come on, cousin. How can that be? And by denying it, we are then turning our minds away from all the components that are important. Here's one for you, cousins. In earlier 2019, one of the largest private equity firms in the world determined that every future investment they make, they were going to have a component of it be based upon the impact of climate change. Cousins, that's where capitalism meets climate change. Okay? Does it get any more real than that? I would suggest not. The other factor is accepting we just got through an election, cousins. Now, we've learned more about elections than perhaps we ever thought we did before. We just thought for the presidential election, you go in, you pass your ballot, it'd be counted, and they'd make a decision. We found out over a few years ago with Gore versus Bush that all of a sudden the electoral college starts to come into play, where the person who wins the most most votes, popular votes, have the most cousins vote for him or her, doesn't necessarily win the election, right? Because the electoral college. Okay, now because of all the other components that have been going on, we've heard a whole lot more, and I have some people going to be coming on later shows in 2021 that's going to give our cousins a better understanding, step by step from the legal perspective, as to what all this means and why in 2020 we got very close to losing our democracy. That was a terrible thing, cousins. You'll see how close it was when we have that conversation coming up in a few episodes. And last but not least is, come on, cousins, we had so many of us who were fighting over wearing our masks. Think about it, going back to March timeframe. People didn't want to wear masks. And as my grandmother used to say, some people don't believe fat meets greasy. Cousins, come on. How hard is that to wear this in order, one, to take care of me, and also to make sure that if I happen to have this COVID-19, I'm not going to spread it to you? Cousins, this is not a political question. It is not a question of the Constitution. It is not a question of your personal freedoms. It's a public health issue. Simple. And we all have it. Almost everybody you know now has had somebody who's either been exposed, had COVID-19, or has had some other kind of ailments, right? I mean, there's too many people who have been exposed to it. You know, we've had over 250,000 cousins die in the United States of America because we didn't wear masks, didn't wash our hands, and didn't take common sense, I'm using the word common sense approaches, and got caught up in something else that wasn't about taking care of your other cousins and basic public health. Right, cousins? It was a bad idea. So, cousins, those are my bad ideas I think we covered with you. And so now let me give you a refresh. Take a quick one. And let's talk about some of the things that we talked about during the course of this season that were in fact labeled as being bad ideas, because that's the name of the show, but actually were pretty good ideas, shall we say. And the one we did just recently was called empathy. Empathy is what we all are going to need to start to be able to move forward, cousins, together in a more understanding and compassionate way. Why? Because we have a lot of things to change. 2020 identified a lot of exposures that we have within the basic systematic infrastructure of our country. The laws, the healthcare system, the tax system, the economics, where people get their jobs, how business is conducted, how the federal government supports different organizations. You see what I'm saying, cousin? And that's just top list. That's list off the top of my head. I'm sure you have your own. But those are things we need to start talking about and paying more attention to. How do we redesign these things with the 2021 technologies, capabilities, and opportunities for all the cousins in the United States? The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. I love those people. Why? Because they tell me what the weather is going to be on a real accurate basis. I determine whether I can tell my wife whether I can do work one day in the yard or not based upon what they say is going to be the weather patterns, right? They help everyone. They help the farmers. They help if you happen to live in a coastal flooding area, they help you. They're helping the sailors. They're helping the farmers. These people are fantastic, and they deserve more of our support. In fact, there were elements last year in which they were getting their budget cut. That's not a good idea, but the organization is great. Taking care of our cousins by the federal government. Remember back at the beginning of this year rather, there were the stimulus checks that went out to everybody. If you had a certain income based upon your taxes, you got a check from the government. Now, maybe some of you cousins put that money in the bank. Maybe some of you invested in the stock market and got some appreciation. But I'd bet you most of you cousins spent the money. And what we found out this 2020 season is that 75%, roughly 75% of the gross domestic product, I mean all goods and services calculated up, comes from what? Cousins spending money. So it's simple, cousins. If we don't have the money, we can't spend the money, right? Credit notwithstanding, because you only can get so much credit, right? Or as one cousin once said, if I still have checks, I can write more of them. No, you can't. So when Congress allocated money at the beginning of the year, which did what? Helped with the stimulation, helped to keep the economy going, helped us to continue to be able to support those businesses that were close to us that we could. Now they've been caught up since the middle of the year trying to figure out back and forth why not take care of the cousins again. I don't understand that. The good idea was putting money in the hands of the people who are going to what? Spend the money and keep the economy moving. We're moving into 2021. Isn't that exactly the same situation we need to have? So I don't care what you call it, cousins. The point is we give money to banks. We give money to all sorts of people. Why don't we give it to the cousins who are what? Going to put the money back into the economy. We may get some economists to come on and talk about that a little bit later too. But it was a good idea at the beginning of the year. I don't understand why it became a bad idea toward the end of the year when people are in more need. By the way, if you got during the holiday season, what were you going to do? You're going to buy as many gifts as you could, right? Isn't that kind of what we do? Right. The other thing we talked about and thought was worthwhile was accessing multiple mobile sources of information, cousins. Why? Because if you only listen to one form of information, one television station, one news feed, one thing you get on your cell phone, what's that going to do? That's going to start to channel what you think, what you see, and what you hear. And cousins, the world is more complex and more broad than being presented by any one source. So we talked about having a 5-day session looking at 5 different sources of information. There are multiples out there. Try to find those that wherever you are, that's right where you are, centered to you. Watch that one. Then watch one totally different that's not centered to you, just to make sure you're getting all the information. And then try one that's outside of your norm. I like BBC and National Public Radio, British Broadcasting Corporation, and National Public Radio for that one. Why? Because, cousin, this is a complex world. We need different sources of information in order to come together. So what? We can understand different perspectives, we can have that empathy, and we can find where there truly is common ground. Why? No one's 100% right, and no one's 100% wrong. And if we start going those polar opposite positions, that takes away from our unity. That's not good. So look at those 5 different options. Also, cousins, hey, the truth has become a brand new thing, right? Telling the truth. You go to your favorite place where you might be able to have some brown liquor. You talk to the bartender, and he asks you, you ask him, what do you want? Give me a good brown liquor. And if he tells you something about it and it's not good, are you going to ask him his opinion again? No, because the bartender, he or she knows that their benefit and their tip and you coming back is based upon the accuracy of the information they give you. We apply that to everything. So we should apply it to everything we have in our life, from our highest levels of political offices down to the person who's going to be offering you your next drink. We need to have the truth being told. And lastly, cousins, let me say that we started back in June, July timeframe with the preamble of the Constitution. We're going to end up as being a good idea as the preamble of the Constitution again, and recognize that when we say we the people is strong, is invigorating, is enthusiastic, and is the way we're going to be able to get through all the challenges that the world in the future is going to hold for us. And that's a really good idea, cousins. So with that, that's a wrap up for this year, for this season. I want to thank you for all your support. Please tell your friends about it. And cousins, keep wearing your masks because we still need to work on this one, all right? And once again, you take care of yourselves and I take care of you. Happy 2021 and goodbye 2020.
We are the people.